For most people, the American dream is just an idea. It is a vague, shimmering concept of prosperity, safety, and a white picket fence. But for millions of people living in the darker corners of the developing world, the American dream is not an abstract concept. It is a physical object. It is a small rectangular piece of paper pasted into a passport, a visa. To hold that piece of paper is to hold a golden ticket. It transforms a life of struggle into a life of possibility. It is so valuable, so coveted, that people will trade their life savings, their family's land, and their dignity just for a chance to stand in a room where someone might say, yes. And in Accra, Ghana, for 10 long years, there was a building where they said, yes. It was a 2-story house with peeling pink paint and a corrugated tin roof, sitting on a dusty street in a neighborhood where the roads were barely paved. Outside, an American flag hung limp in the humid West African air. Inside, a portrait of President Barack Obama smiled down from the wall. There were benches, there were uniformed security guards, and behind a desk sat a man who looked, sounded, and acted like an American consular officer. He would take your passport, he would review your documents, he would nod solemnly, stamp the page, and hand it back to you. For a decade, people walked out of that pink building believing their lives had changed. They walked out with legitimate, authentic US visas. The only problem was, they hadn't just visited the United States Embassy. They had visited an organized crime ring run by Turkish and Ghanaian mafias, and the man behind the desk wasn't a diplomat. He didn't work for the State Department. He was a criminal who didn't even speak English as his first language. This is the story of the fake embassy of Accra, a deception so brazen, so long-lasting, and so incredibly successful that it forces us to ask a difficult question. If a lie works perfectly for 10 years, is it still just a lie? Or has it become a system? To understand how this happened, you have to understand the geography of bureaucracy. If you have ever been to a real US embassy, specifically in a high-risk country, you know it feels less like a government office and more like a fortress. There are blast walls, layers of checkpoints, marine guards, and an atmosphere of intimidating silence. It is designed to keep people out. But the fake embassy in Accra was designed to bring people down in. It operated like a business. They advertised on billboards. They sent flyers to neighboring countries like Togo and the Ivory Coast. They targeted people who lived in rural villages, people who had never seen the capital city, let alone a real diplomatic compound. These were people who didn't know that the United States government doesn't usually operate out of a dilapidated house next to a dress shop. The genius of the operation was its audacity. Most scams happen in the shadows. They happen in back alleys or encrypted chat rooms. This scam flew the stars and stripes in broad daylight, 3 mornings a week, from 7:30 a.m. to noon. The customers would arrive by the busload. They were tired, dusty, and desperate. They paid up to $6,000 for the service, a fortune in a region where the average daily income is often less than a cup of coffee. And here is where the story shifts from a simple con to something much darker. Because usually when you pay a scammer for a document, you get a forgery. You get a piece of paper that will get you arrested the moment you land at JFK or Heathrow. But the fake embassy didn't always issue fakes. A disturbing number of the visas they handed out were real. This is the detail that kept intelligence agencies awake at night. The gang had infiltrated the actual legitimate infrastructure. They had bribed corrupt officials within the real administrative systems to procure authentic, blank documents. They were tampering with the official databases. They weren't just mimicking the state, they were cannibalizing it. The consular officer was often a Turkish citizen who spoke English and Dutch. He was an actor in a play that cost $6,000 a ticket. He knew exactly what these people wanted to see. He gave them the theater of authority. He played the gatekeeper to paradise. For 10 years, the local police didn't stop them. In fact, the US State Department later revealed that the criminal ring was paying off local law enforcement to look the other way. The police weren't protectors, they were partners. They provided the security for the scammers. It creates a dizzying image. Imagine standing in that pink house. The guard at the door is a paid-off cop. The official at the desk is a mobster. The document in your hand is stolen property. And the hope in your chest is the fuel that powers the whole machine. The fake embassy didn't just sell visas, it sold false identification documents, counterfeit birth certificates, and bank records. It became a one-stop shop for identity laundering. Criminals, fugitives, and traffickers could walk in with a bag of cash and walk out as a new person, sanctioned by the glowing seal of the United States of America. So, how did it finally end? It wasn't a local detective who cracked the case. It wasn't a sudden pang of conscience from the scammers. It ended because the real world finally collided with the fake one. An informant walked into the real US Embassy, the fortress with the blast walls, and tipped off the regional security office. They launched something called Operation Spartan Vanguard. It sounds like a military assault, but the reality was messier. When the raid finally happened, specialized agents, accompanied by the few Ghanaian SWAT police they could trust, stormed the pink building. What they found inside was a surreal archive of the operation. They found 150 passports from 10 different countries. They found legitimate US visas, counterfeit Schengen visas for Europe, laptops, smartphones, and a dress shirt that the consular would wear to look official. But even then, the system fought back. Several of the ringleaders managed to slip away during the raid, disappearing into the chaotic streets of Accra. Rumors swirled that they had been tipped off by their friends in the local police force. And in a final twist of irony, as the investigation continued, agents discovered that the gang hadn't just vanished. They had simply moved the operation. While the pink building was being raided, elements of the ring were setting up shop in a dress store just down the road, ready to open for business again. Because as long as there is a demand for escape, there will be a market for the exit. When we hear stories like this, it is easy to laugh at the absurdity. A fake embassy, a pink house, a fake diplomat, it sounds like the plot of a comedy. But if you look closer, there is nothing funny about it. The people who lined up outside that building weren't stupid. They were trapped. They were people born on the wrong side of an imaginary line, trying to cross to the other side. They were willing to suspend their disbelief, willing to ignore the peeling paint and the tin roof, because the alternative was to accept that they were stuck. The fake embassy in Accra was a mirror. It reflected the brokenness of the world we have built, a world where a piece of paper determines your worth, a world where the path to freedom is so bureaucratic, so difficult, and so expensive that a criminal in a rundown house can convince you that he is your only savior. The pink building is empty now. The flag is gone. The portrait of the president has been taken down. But somewhere in West Africa, or South America, or Southeast Asia, there is another line forming. There is another desperate person holding a stack of cash, looking for a door that leads out. And as long as that door remains closed, someone, somewhere will always build a fake one.